that kind of opportunity that they probably, and that kind of talent that they probably didn't even recognize in themselves, that I've seen my father, he sees it and he latches onto that and he gives those people opportunities that very few executives, if any, would ever give to someone that didn't have those other qualifications. I've seen him do it time and time again. I think it's that kind of opportunity. I think it's that kind of ability to see something special, to see a talent in someone. That's what America's looking for. That's what America needs to have unleashed in itself, because there's so much potential there that's just been kept down by the elite in D.C., by over-regulation, by bureaucrats sitting in air-conditioned offices in the Beltway, telling people around the country how they should be running their business and making them have teams of lawyers and accountants to be able to do basic tasks. That's what America's sick of.
I need to get in one more question, and it dovetails off of this. So many folks that we talk to, even Republicans, a young millennial Republican we had on the show last hour, said, look, I think Hillary Clinton's a liar. I think she's a terrible person. I think she's a criminal. All things that your father has said that she agrees with. At the same time, though, she says she is not yet convinced because of sort of, shall we say, his unorthodox campaign style at times. Where's the disconnect between the man you just described, who's promoting the young blue-collar worker up to be senior executives, and what this young woman, who's an undecided voter in Florida, saw about your father? What's the closing argument the next 3 days?
Listen, I think the disconnect is, they haven't seen him in that capacity. The old walk softly but carry a big stick. Well, we're in a situation where you have to use the big stick, okay? My father coming in as an outsider, taking on the liberal media, taking on the Clinton machine, taking on the corruption, taking on the D.C. elite on both sides. That's a rare opportunity. That's not something we're going to get again in our lifetime. Someone who's willing to take on the system, an outsider who can come in and fight his way to the top to do that. So, he has had to be a fighter, but I've also seen him be an incredible grandfather. I've seen him be a father. I've seen him be a comforter. So he can do both. But I don't think you could do it in this process against the odds that he's fought against the machines that he's fought against. And all we want to do is end the corruption in D.C. We knew it was going on, but we're running against the most corrupt candidate in the history of the presidency, and I think the American people have had enough of that.
Well, certainly a number of the voters in Florida we've heard and talked to here on Miami Beach have expressed that. Donald Trump Jr. from Trump Tower, I know you got a long 72 hours ahead of you on the campaign trail. Good luck, sir.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
We need to continue our conversation on the election and election day. So let's bring in our fair and balanced panel, because we are just after seeing some brand new poll numbers that we want to talk about. They were released at 6 p.m. last night. Let's bring in Alex Content. She's the former communications director for Florida Senator Marco Rubio's presidential campaign. And Mark Levine, a regular on our show, Democratic member of the Virginia House of Delegates. Alex, I apologize, I said she. I meant he there, so I'm going to go to you for my first question. I want to put up a brand new poll that we saw, a Fox News poll. Hillary Clinton has a 2-point lead over Donald Trump. That is within the margin of error. The campaign is full force ahead of Tuesday. What do you think they are most concerned about in these final hours?
Well, I think they're probably, both campaigns at this point are probably ignoring the national polls and focusing on the state polls, focusing on the Electoral College, where Clinton does have an advantage. She's currently leading in enough states to put her over the 270, but as the national polls have shown, the race has tightened everywhere over the last couple of days, and it will be closer on Election Day. Ohio, where you are today, is a critical state, not just for the presidential contest, but for the Senate contest, where I know Rob Portman has a big lead. Florida, where Leland just did his report from. Marco Rubio, my former boss, has a big lead in Florida currently. But the presidential race is going to be very, very tight, and it's a must-win for both campaigns.
Okay, Mark, I want to bring you in. I think I know your response here. I know that she does have an advantage, but do you think she should also be worried because these poll numbers are rising and there are a good amount of independent voters? In fact, we have another Fox News poll where we look at the independent, those voters who are up for grabs, and we actually see that Donald Trump is just a little bit ahead there. We see that he's polling around 41% and Hillary Clinton more around 33%.
Well, this is certainly no time to be complacent. If you're a Democrat, you definitely need to get out. But I think Hillary has shown that she can appeal across the aisle. People forget that she worked with Republicans very well and was very highly thought of by the Republicans in the Senate. And as Marco Rubio, Alex's former boss, said, and actually he still believes, Donald Trump is a bully who's basically been a dangerous con man who's cheated people his entire life. So I know there are people that are hurting out there in America that just want this election to go away. I would say to them, look, Just because Donald Trump has cheated on his taxes and cheated other people, he hasn't done it for you, and he won't do it for you. That is just his way of practice for 70 years. And I would think that at least those independents would recognize someone who can work across the aisle rather than someone who's really dividing this country.
Alex, what do you think? Who has more of an advantage with the independent voters, especially when we've had new news come out from the FBI just more than a week ago? People are still digesting this new information.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine a worse way for this campaign to end for Hillary Clinton. It's why we've seen the polls tighten so much in the last week. I mean, she's under investigation by the FBI, and that investigation will not be over on Election Day. So we have the prospect of potentially electing somebody who's currently under investigation by the FBI, under a criminal investigation. I think that's unprecedented. It's bad for the country. It's just something that is unfathomable, and it's why so many Democrats down ticket, I think, have had trouble defending her over the last couple of days. For instance, in Florida, the Patrick Murphy, who himself is facing, one of his donors is facing an FBI investigation, he continues to say that he believes that Hillary Clinton is 100% honest. How can any Democrat say that Hillary Clinton is 100% honest, that they trust her 100%? I think that's why you're seeing across the map Senate candidates, Republican Senate candidates, finishing very, very strongly beat in Florida, where you are in Ohio, places like Wisconsin. Republicans down ballot are doing very, very well. And on the top of the ticket, obviously, Donald Trump is closing the gap quickly.
You know, this shows the danger of when the FBI...
All right, Mark, I want to...
Yeah, go ahead.
I would love to hear your response on that, because you have to defend the candidate.
It shows the danger when the FBI puts its thumb on the scale. Rudy Giuliani was talking about FBI agents. We're going to spread this innuendo. Donald Trump, we know from the leaks, is under investigation, criminal investigation, too, for his ties to Vladimir Putin. But the FBI shouldn't be spreading this innuendo. Here we have James Comey saying, I don't know of any evidence against Hillary Clinton. I don't know that any of it's significant, but I'm going to look into Anthony Weiner's emails. They may all be duplicate. And suddenly everyone's like, FBI investigation. William Weld, the Libertarian candidate for vice president, put it well. He said there's a 1 in 1,000 chance.
I hate interrupting you, but it's worse to get cut off from the television. We have a computer involved. So, gentlemen, thank you so much.
Right now, there are growing concerns about a massive cyber attack possibly hitting the U.S. on Election Day. The FBI and the Department of Homeland Security are assessing any potential threats. The big concern is securing the vote to make sure the results on Tuesday are fair and square. Brian Yennis is in our New York City newsroom with more on this story. Brian?
Hi, John. Well, officials at the Department of Homeland Security are, quote, very concerned about cyber attacks that could, quote, cause confusion on Election Day. The real concern is not that hackers can somehow skew the actual presidential vote count, that is, changing votes from one candidate to another. The real concern is that hackers could attack state voter databases, stealing personal information, and attack state election websites that report official election results. Hackers could manipulate these websites or launch denial of service attacks, shutting sites down entirely, causing people to question the integrity of the election results, especially if this election is close, given the huge mistrust between the two parties and accusations by Republican candidate Donald Trump that the system is rigged. Now, the probability of hackers or a foreign government like Russia altering the presidential vote count is slim because the U.S. voting system is fragmented and decentralized. Voting is done state by state, district by district, and polling place by polling place. Also, electronic voting machines are not connected to the internet, which further protects the voting system from cyber attacks. Now, cyber attacks are a concern following the WikiLeaks breaches and known attempts by Vladimir Putin to disrupt our election process. Now, also, this summer, at least 2 state election systems in Arizona and Illinois were successfully infiltrated by hackers. In Illinois, hackers took voter data and the stolen information was not deemed that sensitive. Now, DHS has since taken steps to protect us, offering states risk assessment and scanning for malware, specifically helping states protect their election result websites. Now, cybersecurity experts will monitor Election Day from DHS's Cybersecurity Center, and cyber fly teams will be standing by to deploy if there are any major attacks. John?
Let's hope there aren't. Brian Yennis. Brian, thank you.
No problem.
2 State Department contractors with decades of hands-on experience devoted to protecting our country's most sensitive secrets are speaking out for the very first time to our chief intelligence correspondent, Catherine Herridge, about Secretary Clinton's tenure.
Mr. Oyster. Government contractor Dave Witness says he worked within the State Department's Office of Security Technology, which is responsible for cameras, alarms, and sweeping for bugs. He quickly noticed the rules didn't seem to apply to Secretary Clinton and her team.
The State Department was a oyster, and it was great for the foundation and great for the Clintons to be able to have such a great position.
What is the primary target of a foreign intelligence service?
So, number one person would be the Secretary of State, their communications. What are their intents? What are their purposes?
As Mrs. Clinton was sworn in as secretary in January 2009, government contractor Emil Smith says he was also working at the department.
State Department rules are clear. I helped write those rules.
Smith says his 30 years of experience includes serving in the U.S. Army's 82nd Airborne before becoming a counterintelligence and counterespionage investigator at State, tracking down breaches of classified materials.
I hear things like, well, I forgot, I don't know that I was trained, I don't know this. Every single person that had access to that information when it was sent is in violation.
Smith reviewed some of the FBI witness interviews known as 302s with Fox. They show secure facilities for classified information known as SCIFs were specially built for Secretary Clinton in her Washington, D.C. and Chappaqua, New York homes. Doors that were supposed to be locked were left open.
If you've got an uncleared person in there, it's automatically a compromise.
It says that there were personally owned desktop computers in the secure facilities at Secretary Clinton's homes, yet she told the FBI that she did not have a computer of any kind in these facilities.
If somebody said they're there, then they probably were there, and the reason you would deny it was because you probably didn't have approval.
Witness team handled requests for Mrs. Clinton's devices.
It was unfathomable that it would be used for anything other than just unclassified communication.
You had no idea that there was sensitive information on this BlackBerry, and she wanted to use it for all information.
Correct. We just thought it was for her unclassified use.
But more than 2,100 emails with classified information, another 22 at the top secret level, passed through Clinton's unsecured private server.
What do you think happened at the State Department?
Personally, there had to have been somebody moving classified information from CLAN. CLAN, again, is secret, confidential only, and JWICS. JWICS is where all top secret information is.
After new emails were found in the Anthony Weiner sexting case belonging to his estranged wife, Clinton aide Huma Abedin, the FBI reopened the Clinton email investigation.
We do know that his estranged wife's emails are on that computer.
Whether it's the private email server, whether it's this private laptop, if there's classified, one document on there that's classified, it's a violation. Somebody violated the law. Throw all the politics out the window. What we're talking about is the defense of this nation.
Asked about Smith and Whitna, the State Department emphasized the head of diplomatic security told the FBI Secretary Clinton was, quote, very responsive to security issues. In Washington, Catherine Herridge, Fox News.
Yeah, of course, speaking of the Buckeye State, it has another name during the election years. The Bellwether. The presidential candidate who has won Ohio has gone on to win the White House every election since 1964. This time around, polls show the race here is within a handful of points. Joining me now, Professor Justin Buechler. I got it right? Political science professor and campaign expert at Case Western Reserve University here in Cleveland. So I made a statement there that I want you to either agree or disagree with. Can you be the president and lose Ohio?
You can be the president and lose Ohio. Every electoral vote is equal to every other electoral vote. You need 270 to win, and it doesn't matter how you get there. So Ohio has 18 electoral votes. It doesn't matter which electoral votes you use to get to 270. Obviously, you would rather win Ohio than lose Ohio, but remember, North Carolina has 15, Florida has 29. So whoever has tended to win, Ohio has tended to win, but the reason that's the case is Ohio is relatively evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans. The country is relatively evenly divided between Democrats and Republicans.
That's what I wanted to ask you, because there's been so much focus on a number of states as there is every election cycle. Is it safe to say that Ohio is a microcosm of the nation? And then in your observation, is that a shift is that a trend that you think could be shifting?
Yes. So, for the most part, Ohio is politically similar to the country, and that's why whichever way the country goes, that's how Ohio goes. So whoever wins at the national level tends to win Ohio. But this year, right now, Donald Trump has probably a small lead in Ohio, so it looks like Donald Trump will probably win Ohio. But right now, at the national level, Hillary Clinton has probably a small lead, and if you have to bet right now, Hillary Clinton probably has a small lead. So it looks like this is the year that the record might be broken, and it's absolutely possible for somebody to win the presidency without Ohio. All you need is 270.
When you study numbers, you study trends, what do you find most fascinating about the state of Ohio as far as what voters are caring about this year? Is it anything unique that they care about this year in particular?
I don't think Ohio is particularly unique in what they care about. So right now what's going on in the country is we have a strange election. So it is very rare for one party to win more than 2 elections in a row. That's very rare. It's happened once since the post-World War II era. So 1980, 1984, 1988. It is very rare for one party to win 3 elections in a row. Usually it takes a very strong economy. But this year we have a very strange election because we have 2 arguably weak candidates. And the test has been Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump. We have the 2 lowest polling candidates, the 2 lowest polling nominees we've ever seen. And the question is, which candidate is weaker? And what's happened is we've got a sort of tepidly growing economy. The economy is growing. There's positive GDP growth, but it's not all that much. We've got a Democratic Party that has won 2 elections in a row, which would normally mean a Republican year, but we also have Donald Trump as the nominee, and Donald Trump is a very weak nominee, and that's really helped Hillary Clinton. But over the last week or so, we've seen what's happened to that lead.
We don't have much time left. My last question, and I'm going to put you on the spot. We've had this conversation before. Right. What do you find most fascinating about this election because it is so unique?
Donald Trump, obviously. Donald Trump has been the strangest nominee we've ever seen. In political science, there was no model that predicted he would get the nomination, and yet he did. We have seen more twists and turns in this campaign than anybody ever imagined. A week ago, nobody thought we would be where we are now with the FBI announcement. This campaign has taken more twists and turns than anybody has ever imagined.
But it also means a lot of people are engaged, and we love that.
Yes, but it's the strangest campaign we've ever seen.
All right, Professor, thank you so much. I appreciated bringing your expertise.
Republican millennials are truly the golden goose for the Trump campaign and could be decisive in major swing states, especially here in Florida. We actually found one of them, Republican and millennial Mary Ann Mancuso, who joins us now. Golden Goose, my producer said that about you, much nicer than anything's ever said about me. We found you because of a Women's Health article you wrote. You said, I think Hillary's a criminal, but I don't want to vote for Trump. 72 hours, what do you do?
This is where it really gets tight, right? Because we know that we have both candidates. One is predictable, and the other one is unpredictable. And when it comes to this election, we are the deciding vote as a millennial, and so we really have to figure out and get down to policy and brass tacks with both candidates.
What are you going to do? You're going to go into the ballot box, you're going to vote for 2? One of the 2? Would you write somebody in? What would you do?
I think it's a game time decision. So when I walk into the booth, it's either going to be one or the other, or there's the option to write in a candidate, thanks to our founding fathers.
And you would take that option? You don't view that as a cop-out?
I don't, because as John Quincy Adams pointed out, he said that if you write in your candidate, at least you know that you voted for the right person.
Give me a sense of what the deciding factor for you is. This about tax? Is this about foreign policy? What's this going to come down to for you?
For me, this has been a foreign policy election from the get-go. I started my time on Lindsey Graham's presidential campaign, and he had it right. It's a foreign policy issue because we need to defeat ISIS, and we need to fight them over there and not bring them home.
Last question for you. Hillary Clinton, potentially the first woman president, obviously will be if she wins. Does that make a difference for you?
No, it doesn't. Absolutely not.
Why not?
Because it's not about gender in this race. It's about policy, and it's about who's going to keep America safe at home and basically give us the world stage back the way that we deserve.
In the last 15 seconds, there are so many Republicans who have, in their own words, sort of held their nose, be it Paul Ryan, who's gotten behind Trump, sort of, be it Lindsey Graham, others say, okay, look, we just have to do this. And they say you're being disloyal to the party. Does that matter?
I'm not being disloyal. I'm actually standing behind and up for my beliefs and my values, and if you don't stand for something, you're going to fall for anything.
Well, Great piece for those who want to understand undecided voters. Women's Health, Marianne Mancuso, appreciate your time and insight.
Republicans are in a fierce battle to maintain control of the Senate, where they are defending a whopping 24 seats on Tuesday, compared to just 10 for Democrats. And new polls out this week show the race tightening in some key states. In Wisconsin, incumbent Republican Senator Ron Johnson appears to be closing the gap with Democrat Russ Feingold, whose lead is now less than 3 points in the latest Real Clear Politics average, down from almost 7 last week. But in Pennsylvania, it's the Democrat who is gaining, with Katie McGinty overtaking incumbent Republican Senator Pat Toomey. She now leads in the Real Clear Politics average by almost 3 points. That race was tied just 1 week ago. So a couple of weeks ago, Dan, the Republican Senate looked like it was lost. Now there's people that I know, pollsters, people saying they could sneak through with a majority with 51.
Yeah.
What's happened?
Well, the Senate is going to be Tuesday night's undercard, and it is going to be exciting. It's going to be so much fun to watch it because, look, the almighty polls have been flipping from one end to the other in a lot of these races. And some weeks Kelly Ayotte is down by 4. A week later, she's up over Maggie Hassan by 4.
What accounts for Ayotte's rally?
Well, I think because Ayotte has been running a pretty strong campaign. Most of these Republicans have found their feet. Pat Toomey in Pennsylvania, and maybe not so much Richard Burr in North Carolina. He's been having problems. But most of these races, I think, have tightened because people are beginning to figure out or decide, do they want, if Hillary Clinton looks like she's winning, do they want divided government? Do they want to give control of the Senate to Republicans?
Here's what's happened in Wisconsin. Ron Johnson threw out his Beltway advisors and consultants, got some local Wisconsin people. He started running excellent ads that reminded people who he is, a manufacturer, an outsider, not somebody who's part of the problem. And Russ Feingold, others have been reminding them that he was a 3-term senator. Yes. He's got nothing. He's bringing nothing new to the table. Yeah. So that has reshaped that race. Yeah. What about Toomey, though? Because Toomey has been doing well in the Philadelphia suburbs, where you got to do well if you're a Republican. Right. Not so well in the western part of the state.
Well, Toomey, that race is always going to be a squeaker. I mean, it was a squeaker for Toomey to get in. It's just a very closely divided state. But Toomey's a quality candidate. I have not ruled him out yet. And I think he's typical of the candidates that are up this cycle in the Senate, whether you're talking about Marco Rubio, Ron Johnson, Pat Toomey. These are strong candidates. And I think the left and the Democrats overplayed their hand a little bit with the Trump card, just going out there and saying, we're going to link every Republican candidate to Donald Trump and drag them down. It hasn't worked as planned.
Todd Young in Indiana also sneaking ahead of Evan Bayh, the former senator and former governor. Right. The Democrats bet that he could come in, big pile of money, famous name, but he also has a record that Republicans have exploited.
Yeah, I think they were hoping voters had forgotten about the Obamacare votes. You look at premium increases everywhere, people have not forgotten. And it seems like a bad time to run as sort of Mr. Washington insider, which is really who Evan Bayh is. But again, versus a couple of months ago, tough map. You talk about the Real Clear average. If every senator ahead wins in that average, Republicans end up with 52 seats. So this is definitely much better than where they thought they were going to be a while ago. We're going to see as it closes here. I like Ron Johnson closing hard in Wisconsin. Richard Burr, he's made some mistakes in North Carolina, but his opponent, ACLU lobbyist, probably too far left for the state. She ended up having to say that she lobbied against a sex offender registry, but actually she was for it.
Here's the problem with Burr, though. He took that race for granted. He didn't go after. He thought he had an easy opponent, and he hasn't really rehabilitated his own image. He's been attacking her on the same points you're making, but he hasn't shown people, okay, vote for me. That's one way. Roy Blunt in Missouri has actually rehabilitated himself in some ways with some positive ads. You haven't seen that in North Carolina.
He's in trouble, though. He's been painted as an insider. He and his family lobbyists, and it's working for his opponent there.
Kim, how do you see it? What are your sources telling you about this Senate campaign? Any surprises you expect?
Well, there is a lot of worry about Missouri in particular and Roy Blunt, and that could be one of the surprises of the night. The Republicans are doing much better than they were a week ago. People are feeling a lot more confident, but you could end up having one of these topsy-turvy moments where a guy like Roy Blunt loses, because in this case, he's also up against a very dynamic, younger generation millennial, former veteran who defies a lot of the stereotypes Democratic candidates, and that is going to be a tough race.
And What about Florida, Kim? Do you think Marco Rubio is going to pull it out? He was leading for quite a while, pretty comfortably, and then it got close, and then they came in with a bunch of ads against Patrick Murphy, the congressman.
Yeah, I mean, Patrick Murphy, not a great candidate. Marco Rubio was leading. Look, I think Rubio has sort of been hurt a little bit by Hillary Clinton's massive investment in Florida and her organizational ground game, which has bled off and helped Murphy some. Now that the Republicans are putting their eye back on the ball, he seems to be getting his footing again. Came out of a couple of really good debates, too, where he ran circles around his competitor.
Upset pick, Dan?
Ron Johnson in Wisconsin.
Richard Burr, North Carolina.
Toomey wins Pennsylvania.
Kim, who's your upset pick?
Joe Heck out in Nevada.
Okay, and I'm going with Ron Johnson. All right, in Wisconsin.
Donald Trump looking for a strong finish as the Clinton campaign careens toward Election Day, plagued by WikiLeaks dumps and the restarting FBI investigation into Hillary Clinton's emails. Momentum is in Trump's favor this week, and though he's still behind in most polls, the gap is closing quickly. But is it closing quickly enough? Jim Osmond is the D.C. bureau chief for Media General. We've had him on the show many times. Jim, I want to pop up your predictions on the screen, and then I want to ask you this question because the last time you and I had this discussion, there was a path to 270 that Hillary Clinton was taking that seemed a lot more effortless. And now we can see there, she's not getting quite as many as you had predicted before, 294, so still over 270. But I remember at one point we were talking up in the 300s. So what's changed for you?
Well, I mean, certainly the Comey effect, which is obvious. I think that right after that, her poll numbers started to crater. And in some regards, when you look at the internals of the polls, what we were seeing is that non-college educated women were starting to go towards Trump. And so the map I had probably a few weeks ago was probably one that was the best for Hillary Clinton, the best outlook for her, and that's no longer the case. She's not going to get 350, 360, 370, 380. At best, I think she may get about 320 electoral votes. She probably will get around 280, 290 potentially. But the question is, can Trump come back? And I think that the answer to that is yes. There's probably about a 1 in 3 chance that he could pull it off, but he's not going to get any more than, say, 272, 273.
Okay, and I want to talk about a few specific states with you, but first and foremost, I had read a stat that Real Clear Politics says that 6 states have a margin of error, or a margin rather, of 2 points or less. And in 2012 and 2008, it was closer to 4 states. And 6 states, I mean, that could be the possibility of seeing a surprise on voting day. 6 states is a lot.
Well, it feels like fool's errands at the election time almost every 4 years, where political consultants on the left and the right say, hey, Pennsylvania's within 2 points. Republicans get on a plane to Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and they don't win. I think that, you know, Michigan is likely to go to Hillary Clinton and has for many, many years gone to the Democrats. The same with Wisconsin. I just am skeptical when I see polls that have it that close. But if you look at the average from the entire election, she's been leading in every poll in Michigan. So that's what I look at most, is not necessarily 1 or 2 at the end, but the entire polling for the election.
All right, well, Jim, I have about 5 more questions for you, but I'm getting the rap cue in my ear, and I know that you're familiar with that, so I'm sure we're going to have you back, and thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Welcome to this special Saturday edition of the 572 Hours to Go. The nominees sprinting across the battleground states that will decide Tuesday's election. Celebrities and even babies are turning out on the trail to lend a hand to Clinton and Trump. Let's take a look at their last 24 hours.
In 3 days, we are going to win back the White House.
The next president of the United States is Hillary Clinton.
We don't need Jay-Z to fill up arenas, you know. We do it the old-fashioned way. And I actually like Jay-Z, but you know the language last night.
Will we reject a dark and divisive vision for our future and embrace a hopeful, inclusive, unifying America?
Look at that baby, so cute. Oh, give me that baby. Future construction worker.
I want to be the president for everybody. Everybody who agrees with me, people who don't agree with me.
To all Americans, I say, it is time for change. It is time for new leadership.
Let's vote for the future. Let's vote for what we want for our country.
All right, only 2 points separate the presidential nominees, according to a brand new Fox News poll that was out last night. So this is it, Kimberly.
Yeah.
We're like, whew, we can count down the days. I'm so excited for my book tour trip next weekend. I already packed this morning.
Oh, you're
so
very
I could be
good packer.
prepared because I
Yes.
am ready for this week to be over. What about you?
You're like the best packer ever. So, yeah, like, I will tell you something. That was real frightening. Can I just say? The scream was like Howard Dean. She's like, I don't even know, channeling Howard Dean. And it was funny, just the juxtaposition, the baby, this, that, the whole deal. What?
You know what? Why she was screaming? She was possessed through the spirit cooking of John Podesta.
Exactly.
And Podesta's brother.
Yes. Last night, you know, they had Hex Mex. they actually stir-fried a Chihuahua.
Oh, my God.
That's not true
That's
for
not
all
a
you
fun
kids
breaking
listening at
news
home.
They had a ghost beef sandwich.
Can you summarize spirit cooking for us real quick?
Please read Greg's Twitter
There's
feed
some
last
performance
night.
art out there, allegedly, and not magic, just performance art, supposedly, that incorporates some aspects of magic in cooking and
the occult.
And the occult, and yeah.
And this is
whatnot.
and look it up because Eric did.
But here's
he's
the
right.
thing.
It came up in the
Here's thing.
WikiLeaks.
It came up in WikiLeaks. Apparently, this performance artist, Marina something, can't remember her name, emailed John Podesta's brother, Tony and said, Tony, is John, your brother, going to join us? And I guess there was never an answer. So therefore, a lot is being
I
made
wonder
of
if they had risotto.
Important tip is always set your coven to 450 degrees.
Yeah, or just stick with the Colorado brownies.
Well, Eric, we do know a little bit about how these two candidates are trying to close out the race based on where they're going. Because in the battleground states we've been talking about for the last year and a half are the battleground states that it's really coming down to. Especially, they're spending a lot of time in Florida and North Carolina, and of course both in Ohio.
Yeah, and obviously, so we'll know very early on if Trump doesn't win Florida, it's over. It's game over. Ohio, he has to win. North Carolina, he's up a little bit, so he's going to go back there a couple of times before Tuesday's vote. So if he starts to slide in Pennsylvania, which it looks like it's moving a little bit away from him, and doesn't shore up Michigan, Minnesota, or Wisconsin, he has that one path left of Iowa, Nevada, and New Hampshire, right? And there's one congressional district way up in Maine with one CD2, which is one vote. But that path brings it to him too. So there are a couple of ways he can do it. I tell you though, this jobs number that we talked about yesterday is he should be on this. I looked into it, right? So Hillary Clinton saying, hey, look, this is great. Barack Obama saying, look, this is great, 4.9% unemployment rate. You look inside that jobs number. We lost 103,000 full-time jobs last month. 103,000 lost. We increased 90,000 part-time jobs. I mean, so it was 4 times worse than that the month before. What's happening is this economy under Barack Obama has gone from a fully employed economy to people taking part-time jobs, trying to pay for their own medical expenses. It's really bad for the vast majority of people.
Well, I must say the Wall Street Journal on their front page this morning sure had a different story to tell, because they talked about how great this was and especially focused on wages. Wages being up for the first time in, I guess, since '09. Wages going up, and wages going up for the middle class, and suggesting, boy, look at the good state of the American economy. Trump had hoped that some of this economic news would be not so good. But, you know, according to people who are economic analysts, not only in the Journal, but in the New York Times, Washington Post this morning, this was a very good report.
Isn't that like saying, like, a child finally got his first meal after 2 weeks? It's like it's been since 2009. I mean, just by sheer randomness, you're going to get an increase if you just hang around long
but
enough.
what we're talking about is a few days before the election. If that number had been bad, boy, we would be jumping. It is not bad. I think you're trying to spin something.
No, I'm not spinning anything. The analysts were the same analysts that you think were a 2.4% wage growth for a month is fantastic after almost 8 years of stagnant wage growth. If that's good, those same analysts said we needed 175,000 jobs last month. We got 161, and most of them were part-time.
Here's the thing. The bottom line on this was that there's concern about what the Fed will do in December with regard to interest rates. And the Fed, apart from any politics, The analysis this morning was, well, now it looks like they are going to push up some of the interest rate because this is such good economic news for the American middle class. And consumer confidence up.
Can I bring Kimberly in here?
Christmas.
About there's been a lot of talk about gender politics, and last night on Bill O'Reilly's show, he correctly said you basically have to win. Trump would need to win 45% of the women vote in order to get his 270 in order to become president. And one thing that was consistent in research that I looked at was that women across the board, regardless of educational attainment, race, or where they lived in the country, their two #1 issues were national security and personal finances. So it's not about the Fed or about part-time jobs and stuff. It's about those personal finances. Do you think there's anything that Trump or Clinton could do in the next 3 days that could get back on those issues?
She has, you know, the advantage there with women. That's been shown and demonstrated consistently throughout this whole election process. But this is something that is one of his strongest points in terms of being a focus on jobs in the economy, and he needs to personalize that message to say that speak directly to the women out there, that he is the man that can make sure that they have food on the table and money in their wallet and, you know, funds to be able to pay for schools, to be able to pay for health care, all of that, and the national security piece. Women care about security, and that's something where she's been proved, he can say, to be should be distrusted, that she's been incompetent, that she's been reckless with our national security. If you drive those messages home, I think that's something where, you know, he can work, but except we're a couple days before the election now.
We
so
are.
Problematic.
Greg, yesterday, over the last 2 days, the Wall Street Journal has editorialized about both candidates, not providing endorsements or non-endorsements of either, just laying it out there as they see it. Basically, they're called, the two editorials are called The Cost of Clinton, of which they list many, and then The Gamble of Trump, to which they say there's just so much that you don't know. And the last thing it says is on his is, another risk comes from negative impulses on the political right that Mr. Trump's meanest rhetoric has awakened, but that for her, she would face a Congress that wants to investigate her from the first day, an electorate that is polarized and does not trust her.
You know, this election, Dana, is like an old bra. It's down to the wire, and it's getting under our skin. So you have
oh my God.
You have two ways.
Do you have experience with that?
Yes, yes. Well, you know, when you stop lifting, things go. 2 ways to look at this.
Oh my God.
What issue means most to you? If it's immigration, if it's terror, if it's the Supreme Court, then you could argue, does that negate the misgivings you have for your candidate, or does your candidate make those issues worse? That's one way to look at it. The other way to look at it, which is how I look at it every day, and it is, who hates you most? Like, I'm not crazy about Trump, right? Everybody knows that. But I know for a fact that Hillary and her camp, they hate my guts. The Hillary people, the most hardcore people, they hate us. So it's hard. It's like, I'm not crazy about Trump. I find some of his things just completely wrong. But at the same time, I know Hillary wouldn't throw me a life preserver if I was drowning. So that's where I am in all this.
Well, let me ask you,
Hope
what
you
about
can swim.
what about?
I'm holding onto my bra.
But here's the thing. What about the country?
Yeah.
You know, I just think you have at some point, you know, separate out Greg Gutfeld from this race, and you have to say, do you really, in terms of the future of the country, who do you trust most? Who do you trust with your, you know, I have kids or grandkids or...
See, I don't have either, so it's all about me.
It's all about you.
I don't even have a pet. But okay,
are we possibly...
What?
We all have rights. We all have constitutional rights, and we don't want our constitutional rights changed or impinged. That's why, for me, being a single-issue voter with the Constitution and Supreme Court, then you have to side with the GOP and hold your nose, take your medicine, and vote for the GOP, and you may not love them.
Here's why I can't take that, man. To me, what you have in Trump is an authoritarian who's in the model of, like, somebody wrote Hugo Chavez or Vladimir Putin.
He put out...
But they didn't have checks and balances.
Checks and balances. He wants to go after the press. He talks about locking up his political opponent. That, to me, is disquieting.
But guess what? We have an entire hour to talk about this race.
With just 3 days to go, the race for the White House continues to tighten, with a brand new Fox News poll showing Hillary Clinton leading Donald Trump by just 2 points in a four-way matchup. But Tuesday's results all come down to the Electoral College math and a handful of battleground states that still remain too close to call. Republican pollster Ed Goes is here with a closer look at the numbers. So, Ed, good to have you here with us. Thanks for coming in.
Glad to be here, Paul.
Okay, so the conventional wisdom is it's a tight race. race, but Hillary Clinton has a narrow 1 to 3 point lead. Is that how you see it?
I think that's basically where it is. I would put it more 3 to 4 points when looking at the polls. For example, on the Fox poll that you just mentioned, it came down from a 3-point lead to a 2-point lead. But the sample a week ago was 7 points net Democrat. The sample this week was even between the two parties. And that's not accounted for in the numbers. So actually, I don't know that the numbers wouldn't be moving away from Trump as opposed towards him looking at that sample. But I think the key thing in looking at the data, and this is what I've seen this entire campaign, is that both these candidates have extremely high negatives. And the only thing that has really moved is the strongly unfavorable on both these candidates, moving up almost to the 50% mark. So I think everyone keeps looking for big movement in the ballot when, in fact, it's almost like a governor on a car. It's holding both of them down. Someone starts to break loose, and that pulls it back into reason.
But doesn't that mean, Ed, that there could be some volatility at the end? If people are unsatisfied with both candidates, couldn't they just throw up their hands and say, you know, we're willing to go with one or the other and move?
Well, I think that's what you saw in the last couple of weeks. As you saw after the Access Hollywood tape, you saw Hillary Clinton jump in the numbers. That was not coming from people coming from Trump and moving to her. That was from Johnson to her, and you saw Johnson come down from 9 to 6 points. In this most recent FBI, you didn't see Hillary come down. You saw Trump go up, again, from taking more votes from Johnson. So I think that was always the question mark, is what were those voters that disliked both these candidates that were parked with the third-party candidates going to do? And I think they've now come home, and that's where you have a much closer race.
Where do you think Trump stands vis-a-vis Clinton at this stage of the race, the weekend before the election, compared to where Romney stood with Obama 4 years ago?
Well, we had going into that last election the race basically even between both candidates.
That was wrong. I mean, that was way off.
Well, and that's a key point, though, in terms of the real question now, as you see all these individual battleground states get very close, is polling only predicts where the race is if everything else is even. But as you move into this weekend, you're moving from moving the ballot to moving to the polls to actually vote. And that's where you start looking at who has more money, who has more ground game, who has more good surrogates out there driving that vote to the polling place. And as we saw on Election Day in 2012, that if one campaign does not have the quality ground game that the other campaign does, it could make a 2 or 3 point difference at the end of the day.
The promise of the Trump campaign, and the Ted Cruz campaign also promised this, was that they would drive a higher percentage of white vote than Mitt Romney got. Mitt Romney got 59% of the white vote in the end, but they think they could drive that higher, and the higher share of the electorate, which was 72% last time, and make it even higher, 73, 4, or 5. Are we seeing any evidence that that's taking place?
You don't. And what you see, quite frankly, inside the white vote is that Trump is not doing as well with college-educated white females and even college-educated white men. He's far behind the margin where he needs to be on that. And that's kind of come into play in this election. They may turn out, but they're not necessarily voting for him.
Yeah, but you're seeing, but Ed, look, you're seeing, let's take states like Iowa and Ohio, okay? Romney lost both of them. Trump is up in both of them, and they have a relatively smaller share of the minority vote than some of the other states, and Trump's lead in those states is often attributed to those voters.
Well, they are attributed to those voters, and particularly in Iowa. I think Trump is going to win Iowa. I think if you look at the numbers today, assuming that the ground game is even between both those campaigns, I think Trump wins Ohio come Tuesday night. But that's kind of where the story ends.
You don't think Ohio is within reach for Trump?
No, I think Trump does win Ohio, assuming everything is the same. But you look at Pennsylvania, you look at North Carolina, you look at Florida, you look at Nevada, all states that Trump probably has to win to get over that 270 mark. Those states are a real question mark. They have closed, But the real question is going to become the ground game, who does a better job of turning out your vote, on whether he squeaks through on some of those states or, in fact, loses those states.
It'd be fascinating to see, could this be the year where you have a different kind of map, where Trump breaks through in one of these Midwestern industrial states, for example, that like Wisconsin or Michigan. Michigan's close to even, and Hillary Clinton campaigned there on Friday. It was a surprise to me for her to go there. He sneaks through with one of those states, surprisingly, and then could lose a state where Romney won, like North Carolina or you know, perhaps Florida. Romney lost that, but it was close.
Well, I think both Florida and North Carolina are on the cusp. I think it's kind of a false lead in terms of Michigan and in Wisconsin, quite frankly.
So you don't think he's going to make a breakthrough in any of those? You think he's got to go basically to all the Romney states and then sneak into with Iowa, Ohio, maybe sneak in with a New Hampshire, a Colorado, Nevada, something else?
I think he needs Nevada. I think he needs Iowa. I think he could do New Hampshire. He has to win North Carolina. He has to win Florida. He has to win Ohio. And I think the real question mark right now is Pennsylvania. The polling is showing it closing there. But because Pennsylvania doesn't have early voting, there's no real feel for, is there a ground game there, quite frankly, on either campaign side.
Right.
And so Pennsylvania is going to be the race to watch. It's probably one he needs to win, because just having Iowa and even Nevada doesn't get him over the top. So watch Pennsylvania on election night.
All right. Thanks very much, Ed. Appreciate your coming in.
Thank you.
And both candidates have, of course, spent a lot of face time in the Sunshine State, especially Donald Trump. Today we saw both Trump and Clinton. Donald Trump visited Tampa, a city in the crucial I-4 region, the corridor that goes from Daytona Beach through Orlando down to Tampa. That is in yellow on your map, and the home to Hillsborough County, which has predicted the president the past 19 of 20 elections. 40% of Florida voters live in that I-4 corridor. Hillary Clinton spent her Saturday in friendly territory, a Democratic stronghold just north of Miami. You see there in blue. Early voting goes through tomorrow in some parts of this state. The question now, can Democrats get out the vote to overcome what is obviously, and what we have seen here, are some of Donald Trump's fervent supporters, especially up in the panhandle of Florida? Here to weigh in, Miami Beach Mayor and Hillary Clinton campaign surrogate Philip Levine. Mr. Mayor, always nice to see you, sir. Appreciate it. As the rain comes down here.
No rain in Miami.
There's never rain.
We call it liquid sunshine.
There you go. I like that. I like that. So now that we know you'll spin just about anything, spin for me early voting in Florida.
Well, let me tell you what I know right now. In Miami Beach itself, as a microcosm, the early turnout vote is going to be literally twice as much as it was in 2012, and Miami Beach is historically a very strong Democratic city.
Now, what Donald Trump's campaign will say to you is they'll say, absolutely, turnout is huge, and that is because there are so many absolutely fervent Trump supporters who won't tell you they're voting for Donald Trump, but they're coming to the polls.
Well, in Donald's alternative universe, that may be true, but in the reality of the world today, we don't think that's true. Matter of fact, it's actually the opposite. There are so many Republicans, I hear it every day, that are voting for Secretary Clinton. So as far as Dade County, right now, over 100,000 more Democrats have voted as opposed to Republicans. So that's big. These are historic numbers. And as you know, in the state of Florida right now, the Hispanic turnout, which is decidedly very Democratic going for Secretary Clinton, is up 30%.
Now, is it up 30%, you think, for one of which reasons? A, there's more Hispanics. Puerto Ricans have obviously moved in, especially into the Orlando area, which was heavily Republican territory. Is it because Hispanics are sort of incited or outraged by Donald Trump, and therefore they are motivated to turn out? Or there's simply more Hispanics?
I think it really has to do with the fact that Donald Trump has come out as being very anti-Hispanic. He wants to build a wall. He wants the 11 million folks to be sent home. He has degraded a federal judge of Hispanic heritage. So I think if you put those three things together, I think the Hispanics are saying we want nothing to do with Donald Trump. We're seeing it here in Florida. I'm hearing it constantly. And, of course, the African Americans, same situation.
Let's talk a little bit about Florida as we move north in terms of the I-4 corridor. And our Carl Cameron, who it's hard to argue with his political expertise as it goes so far back. Who wins I-4 wins Florida. Big part of the I-4 corridor, I used to work there in Orlando, is the African-American population. And every number we've seen shows African-American turnout is down in Florida. It's also down in North Carolina. It's also down in Ohio.
So I have to disagree. Right now, African-American turnout is up 22% in Florida. It is actually going up. I did an African-American mayor's bus tour 2 weeks ago with great African-American mayors from across the country that came here. The enthusiasm is tremendous. Tomorrow, we have souls to the polls. All the African-American churches are bringing in tremendous amount of them to the polls tomorrow. It's going to be very significant. So I think the enthusiasm's there. President Obama has been here nonstop, going out there and campaigning. And listen, there's a lot of problems going on in the Trump camp. The head of transition is facing a federal indictment charge, Chris Christie. So I'm not sure, where he's going to actually do the transition. Maybe that's going to be in jail, but we don't really know yet. Okay?
Well, he was, in fairness, he was cleared. But your point is well
made. We see Donald's judgment. Donald's judgment is very poor.
Let me ask you this, though. The other person who has shown questionable judgment at times is said by the FBI director was Secretary Clinton. And there's a real question in terms of if all you're saying is true, why is this race so close?
Do you mean after a year investigation when he fully cleared her? And then
he cleared of any crime.
They found out some backup emails that maybe they haven't seen or they possibly have seen. I mean, come on. Let Donald Trump focus on the emails. We're focusing on what affects the American people, not what Secretary Clinton is about.
Is that what we're going to see in this closing argument, you think?
No question
so
about it.
It's going to go more positive.
Let Donald go with his emails. Secretary Clinton is about how does she raise the middle class and make America better for everybody. About the American dream, not about Donald Trump's 1%.
Well, we'll see if her stump speech changes over the next couple of days. Obviously, 72 hours left. We know you were on the trail earlier. Sure you'll be out there tomorrow as well.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Mayor. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right.
The battle for the White House coming down to a very competitive final few days. The latest Real Clear Politics map showing Hillary Clinton's lead has eroded in the battleground state of Pennsylvania. It once looked like it would be a sure thing for her. Now it's rolled a toss-up. Let's bring in Terry Madonna, the director of the Franklin and Marshall College poll and the founder of the Keystone poll. Terry, thanks for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Shannon.
All right, we want to start by looking at the Real Clear Politics average in Pennsylvania. Obviously compiles a number of top polls there. It is worth 20 electoral votes, by the way, a key state. It shows Clinton up by 2.5 percentage points as part of the split, part of the average at this point. The Clinton campaign calling out, the big names. She will be there in Philadelphia with the president, first lady, I think on Monday as well. How important and critical is this state to her for winning?
Oh, I think it's extremely, extremely critical. Imagine this. She now leads slightly in Florida. She has a lead in my state, along with Michigan and Virginia and Wisconsin and Minnesota. If she holds on to all of them and loses Ohio and the states that Trump now leads in, she still gets a path to 270. But the critical state could come down to be Florida. If she loses Pennsylvania and Trump were to win Florida and Ohio, then I think he has a path. He has a path to the White House. And what's fascinating is Pennsylvania, for 6 straight elections, has gone for the Democrats. But 4 years ago, Pennsylvania was the 6th closest state. Of course, the top 3 in terms of closeness were Florida, Ohio, and North Carolina. So those 4 states have really been targeted by both campaigns. As you accurately point out, multiple visits. In fact, they might be able to claim Pennsylvania residency if they hang out in our state much longer.
Yeah. Okay, you
right.
talk about the shift there in Pennsylvania. How much of that do you think this time around has to be with Trump's made a very direct appeal to blue-collar workers, to coal miners, to people who are in manufacturing, those kinds of things, and has emphasized how much their jobs have been hurt by policies over the last 8 years of the Democrats. Do you think that's resonating with them? Is that why he's closed the gap there a little bit?
There's no doubt about it. I mean, that was its initial support base. It's in western Pennsylvania, up in the Northeast, as you accurately point out, where coal was king and steel was king, and all of these huge industries were part of the great industrial era for our country. The jobs have gone away. Trump's biggest support comes from white blue-collar workers, high school educations or less. They are beyond fanatical in favor of him. And conversely, he has to do better with women in the Philadelphia suburbs, where 1 in every 5 voters is cast, where the